Welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Mark Moyer, author of Win Again, speaker, career coach, and business advisor. And I help athletes, executives, and entrepreneurs reach their fullest potential. What you're going to be hearing in every single episode are conversations with athletes and other sports-related influencers. And we'll be offering you the insight that you need to succeed in life, including advice that will let you jump past your competition, whether it be for a great new job or taking your business to a much, much higher level. Make sure to connect with me on social media at Mark Moyer Coach and go to my website, markmoyer.com, to get access to the tips and strategies that my coaching clients get directly. If you're looking for ways to make your mark, send me an email to mark@markmoyer.com and I'll get you going right away. Thanks for joining me today. It's going to be an awesome episode. Now, are you ready to make your mark? Let's do this. Hey everyone, welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast. I'm broadcasting live from podcast headquarters here in New York City, and I hope all is awesome wherever you're listening, whether it's here in the States, if it's Canada, Mexico, or if you're in the military and you're serving overseas. Thank you for your service. And if you can't tell me where you're serving, that's cool. I'm just thrilled you're listening. That's great. I'm in a super mood because I just had the chance to speak with Colonel Ted Studdard, 25 years career in the U.S. Marine Corps. He's retired now, but just a super guy. We had such a great conversation across the board. We covered tons of ground. We talk about how it's so challenging to make that transition sometimes from military life to civilian life, but he's got some great advice about that. We also talk about how it is important to take the time to teach and how to be a really strong leader. And he's got some great stories and lessons about that. And we've also got a pretty funny Hit Your Mark segment. We talk about some antics that went on in the Kuwaiti desert way back over 20 years ago. But before we get started, if you haven't done so already, check out this podcast on iTunes, leave a review, subscribe, get involved, send me a note to mark@markmoyer.com. I'd love to hear from you. All right, let's get things rolling right now with Colonel Ted Studdard. Happy listening. Welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast. This is Mark Moyer, and I'm absolutely thrilled and honored to have Colonel Ted Studdard join me today on the Make Your Mark podcast. Welcome, Ted.
Hey, Mark, it's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, my pleasure. I had the pleasure of meeting you back in May in Las Vegas at the Ogden Leadership Academy event, and it was such a fabulous event because it brought together 30 or 40 people that didn't know each other coming in, but left there, feeling like they'd really spent a couple of days getting to know each other. And you were no different. You were not only, gave a great speech and very eloquent and very powerful, but on top of that, you're very approachable, and everybody there was very approachable. And I thought that made it such a positive experience. But what was your reaction to that event?
It's always great to be around other leaders and just sharing ideas. I mean, it's so easy to get caught up in your own thoughts and really looking at problem sets or just considering things myopically. But as you talk to people and you hear different ideas, that's the way you grow. And it's just fantastic to be around a group of people who are motivated to continue growing no matter where they are in life. And there's no way you can walk away from something like that and not be better for it.
Oh, well, absolutely. And, not only did I learn a fair amount, but I also, again, met some really great people, and you were one of them. And it was, it's been really great to continue getting to know everybody more and more, including yourself, Ted. So let's just jump right in. One thing I wanted to touch on with everybody, all the listeners, is that, again, the bottom line with the Make Your Mark podcast is I like to shine a light and highlight those people that are making a positive impact today and going forward. And, I especially incredibly appreciate your service to our country. You've served for several decades. I think it's 80 years now, 90 years. How long have you?
It feels like it.
I knew you were going to say that. But now you're working, and I'll let you tell everybody what you're doing now. But I just love what you're doing now. But go ahead and let's take a step back though first. And I'm curious to hear what was it that drew you to join the service?
Mark, thank you for that lead, and that was fantastic. My dad and my uncle were both Marines. My uncle fought in World War II at Guadalcanal and Peleliu in New Britain. And my dad served between Korea and Vietnam. And of course, they were both out of the Marine Corps. They did their 4 years and then got out. And that was well before I was born. But it was interesting. As a young kid, I just felt how proud they were of serving their country, specifically as Marines. And I could see how that impacted their life and everything they did. And I just wanted to be a Marine growing up. And it really didn't matter what I did. I could have been a potato peeler in the Marine Corps and been happy. I just wanted to be a Marine. And I was very fortunate to have that opportunity.
So when did you actually jump in? When was that, give or take?
It's a funny story. I played sports all through school, and we were in the football playoffs, and we got beat on a Friday night. And the next Monday morning, I skipped school and joined the Marine Corps.
Did you really?
I did. I joined the delayed entry program, which means I was still in high school, but I was preparing to go to boot camp. And I literally graduated from high school on a Saturday night, and I went to boot camp that Monday morning, bright and early, 2:30 in the morning. Recruiter picks me up, and away we go. And I really intended to do 4 years and then get out and follow in my father's footsteps and join the family insurance business. But along the way, I had the opportunity to go to the University of Georgia. And while I was there, I ran into a Marine officer selection officer, and he said, would you be interested in being an officer? And, that was a pretty easy question at that point. I was a private first class in the Marine Corps, and it didn't take me long to say, yes, I would love to try that. And so one thing led to another, and by the time I graduated the University of Georgia, I'd been through officer candidate school, and I was commissioned as a Marine lieutenant, and went on to serve 25 years as a Marine. And I retired as a colonel.
That's amazing. Now, you said, let's take a half a step back. You said you were playing sports in high school and so forth. So was it football was your sport, or what else did you do?
I played football, baseball, and basketball. If the court was open, I was on it. If the field was open, I was on it. If the weight room was open, I was in it. I just love being part of a team. I love competing. I'd like to say I was good. I wasn't. But I loved it. And I tell you, the lessons I learned playing sports, I think, were lifelong lessons, meaning that I really had to work to play. I couldn't just step out on the field and play. I had to work at it. But I wanted to play so bad that I was willing to work as hard as I absolutely could. And that served me well as a Marine, and it has served me well in life, that work ethic that I learned through sports early on.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because a lot of what I speak about in the book and some other things is that there are a lot of traits and characteristics of an athlete that carry really well into the corporate space, but they certainly carry well into the military. And it sounds like you were able to really leverage those when you made that transition. So that's great to hear. Now, 25 years obviously is a very long time, and I know that you did a fair amount of moving around. You spent some time in California, Virginia, Tennessee. I mean, you've been all over the country and the world, right? Give me if you want, just maybe a highlight. I know there's 25 plus years of highlights, but I know that you have a few moments that stand out. I know you had a couple of great stories to tell when we met the first time, but maybe give me a story now of sometime when you're looking back of an instance that you met somebody that left such an impression that you remember that today.
I will tell you, my first battery commander, I was an artilleryman throughout my time in the Marine Corps, which means we shot the big howitzers, machine guns, and that kind of thing. And it was really my first experience as a fleet Marine. I've been through all the training, and I joined my first unit. It was in late November. And on New Year's Day, we went to do our first field exercise, and we were gone for about a month. And it had just been miserable weather. And it had rained. It was cold. It rained every day. And we had this special munition that we were carrying, and it was for training. And there were only a few places in the world that we could shoot that munition. And we were training in an area where we could shoot that. And the conditions had just not been right to shoot that munition and do the training associated with it. And finally, the skies cleared and we were in the right position. Everything just worked out properly for us to be able to shoot it. And my commanding officer, he's just a great leader and a dear friend today. His name is M.A. Singleton.
Okay.
And Captain Singleton at that point had gone back to our headquarters to get our next operations order, our next plan on what we were going to do. And as he was gone, I was in charge of the shooting. And I saw this great opportunity to shoot this ammunition and do this training with the Marines. So, boom, we shot and we shot and we shot. And it turned out fantastic. And I was so happy for the Marines, and just, everybody was on cloud nine. And I looked in the distance and I saw Captain Singleton driving back into our position. And as he came back into our position, I just couldn't wait to talk to him. And I said, "Sir, did you see what we just did?" And he said, "Ted, what do you mean?" I said, "Sir, did you see what we just shot? Could you see the impacts? It was fantastic." And he looked at me and he said, "Did you shoot that ammunition?" I said, "Yes, sir, I did." And I was thinking, wow, I'm the hero of the day, right? Well, he looked at me and he asked me, he said, "Ted, did you really shoot that?" I said, "Yes, sir, I did." And he looked at me and he paused, and I realized that he's not quite as excited about this as I am, but maybe he didn't quite hear me right. And so, I tried again, "Sir, did you see this?" He said, "Ted, do you know where everybody is?" And I said, "Oh, yes, sir." And so he started asking me questions about where other units were located in this training area. And this munition was something that you never shot over the head of friendly forces unless it was a dire emergency, and then only in combat. And so he's going down this list of different units that were out in the field training. There were like 2,000 Marines out there. He finally got to the mortars. He said, "Ted, do you know where the mortars are?" And all of a sudden, I could feel this cold feeling going down my spine. And I looked at him and I said, "No, sir." He said, "Ted, they're about 300 yards or 300 meters in front of you." And they were just, in the folds of the earth, and you really could not see them because of the terrain. And they had moved in during the night, and I did not know they were there. And Mark, I had violated every possible procedure that I could. And he said, "Come here, let's talk." And I thought, I'm done. I've been in the Marine Corps for a month now, and the rest of the time I'm allowed to stay in the Marine Corps, I'm going to be in the gym handing out basketball. And I just felt horrible. And I had a tremendous amount of respect for this guy. And of course, I felt like I'd let him down and just felt horrible. And so we stepped behind this huge rock. And I thought, well, at least he's got the decency to fire me behind the rock, not in front of everybody, to save me the humiliation. And we walked back there for a couple of minutes, which seemed like a couple of hours. He asked me, did I know what I was doing? And of course I did, but I just made a mistake. And at the end of that, I was thinking, well, let's go ahead and get it over with. Just pull the trigger and let's be done with it. I'll be on the next helicopter back. And, my short-lived career in the Marine Corps. But at the end of that, he said, "Ted, listen, I believe in you. I trust you." And he put his arm around me and said, "Don't ever make that stupid mistake again. Now go out there and train your Marines." Holy cow. Man, I went from feeling, at the bottom of the earth to 10 feet tall and bulletproof. And not only did I know that this guy had my back and he was going to take care of me, but he was going to teach me and hold me accountable. But everybody else, those 200 other Marines, also knew what had happened. And that developed a trust and a bond with our leader, not just for me, but for our whole unit. Little did we know that we would be in combat less than a year later. And because of that, we had a foundation built on trust that would carry over in some very trying times. But because we had that trust, we were able to do some incredible things. And that's leadership 101. You trust people, you empower people, and they'll make mistakes, but as long as it's not illegal, immoral, or unethical, you stand by them and you take the opportunity and you teach them. And I'll never, ever forget that.
And you probably won't be shooting that ammunition above people's heads again, right? I guess.
Yeah. One of those note to self moments.
Yeah, one that you really remember. Now, describe to me how things. I mean, you gave a great story of how you became involved with the Joint Chiefs and so forth. But how did that all develop? I mean, what led to that?
It's again, one of those things you never really expect to happen, nor do you ever plan for it to happen. I'd been selected to go to the National War College in Washington, D.C. And while I was there, my monitor, who was our career planner, called me and said, Ted, I would like to submit your name to serve on the Joint Staff in the Pentagon. And would you like to do it? And of course, the answer is yes. And not that I really had a choice anyway. But he submitted my name and I was screened and vetted. And ultimately I was chosen to serve on the Joint Staff. And I tell you, it was an incredible experience. The Joint Staff ultimately works for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And the chairman is the senior military leader for our nation's military, and he's a senior military advisor to the president. So you can just imagine having the opportunity to serve there was just absolutely incredible. And with that, I had the opportunity to serve and ultimately lead the current operations team for Afghanistan and Pakistan. And during that time, we were at the height of combat in Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan. So it was really a unique time to be there, not only to be there personally and professionally, but just in the context of our nation's history, it was an incredible experience.
Well, clearly, let me take a step back. So did you have any of these teaching moments with, I don't know, maybe the president perhaps, or you didn't really have to interact too much? How'd that go?
It's kind of funny. I'll share another story with you, but leadership, there are special people who are leaders. And I did a project one day, something came down and, I answered the question that was asked and addressed a problem and worked on this thing all day. And, sometimes you don't know where that is going to end up. And at the end of the day, I got a note back from the White House that said, thank you for what you did. So, you have those kind of moments. But what really struck me is there are a lot of people as busy as I was that were way busier than I and had a lot more important things to do. But a leader at that level, taking the time to write a note, taking the time to say thank you is incredible. And if somebody at that level can do it, I can certainly do that no matter what I'm doing in life. So, just one of those great lessons learned and one of those things that you tuck away, and here we are talking about it today. But I tell you, I had a great teaching moment. I kind of refer to this as a green mile. I hadn't been in the Pentagon long, maybe 3 months, and basically had learned my way to the bathroom and back. And I got a call early one morning to work on a project. And my boss was gone that morning. He was at an appointment. So somebody from our leadership team came and asked me to work on this project. And I'd worked on it all afternoon, all morning and all afternoon. And I called back down to my boss, and this was on a Friday afternoon, and I let him know I was finished with the project. And he called me and he said, Ted, what in the world are you doing? What are you working on? And I explained to him what I was doing. He said, you need to get down here now. And when I say get down here, our office was in the National Military Command Center, which is in the basement of the Pentagon. And I was working with our future ops team, which was in a different part of the Pentagon. So I hustle back. I go through the multiple layers of security and work my way down to our offices. And he said, what in the world are you doing? And I explained to him again what I was working on. He said, okay, great. You're working on part of the project, but what I need you working on is the main part of the project. You were working on a supporting effort, but your responsibility is the main part of the project. Well, at this point, it didn't matter about the direction I had been given earlier. That doesn't matter. It's OBE at this point. My responsibility had not been taken care of. And to put this in a little context, it was due at 4:30, and this is now about 4:15 in the afternoon. And it was for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And oh, by the way, he was using what we were working on to inform a brief that he was giving the next morning to his boss. So you can imagine there was a sense of urgency to get this done at this point. So this just became a flurry of activity for the next 5.5 hours. And we finally completed this project a little after 9. And so I put the information, it was a brief, and I put it in our, we have a special carrying case that's locked and it's double wrapped and sealed. And I put it in that, and I take it to our intermediate leader. And I thought that he would ultimately take it to, our leader, his boss, and who would take it then to the chairman. And as I walked into his office to give him the package, he looked at me and said, "I'm not about to take that up to a pissed off Marine general. You take it." And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. And we were the joint staff, so he was with another service. And I thought, you got to be kidding me here. But he was not. And so I strike out to take this to our leader. And, I felt like I was walking the Green Mile. I literally thought I was walking to my professional execution at that point. And our leader was a special guy. He was a Marine general. And I knew him, but I didn't know him well. And we knew each other in passing, but we had never served together. And I was thinking to myself, this is my first interaction with this guy. And not only am I late, I am 5+ hours late with a project I was responsible for his boss, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who needed this a long time ago. So this was not a good thing. And I walk my way up and I knock on his door and I go into his office and everybody's gone except him, and he's in his back office. And as I walk in, he looks at me and he says, "Ted, is this your best work?" Well, how in the world do you answer that? Right. A simple answer. No, sir, it's not. And I was just expecting a face shot. And he looked at me and he said, "Well, let's take a look at this." And so we unpackaged it. And Mark, we spent the next 30 minutes and we went through this brief page by page by page. And I think I learned more in that 30 minutes than I had learned in the 3 months I'd been in the Pentagon. And quite possibly I learned more in that 30-minute time period than I had ever learned in a 30-minute time period. And he took the time to teach me. He made sure that I understood what was needed at this level, what the chairman needed to inform decisions. And ultimately, he helped put this in context. And what really struck me is he had the moral courage to take the time to keep the chairman waiting to teach me. He invested in me because he knew I needed that for the future. And not only that, he didn't throw me under the bus like the other guy did. He then took that package to the chairman. And of course, a great leadership lesson learned on so many different levels. And the irony of this is we would end up serving together for several years thereafter, both in combat and out of combat. And we built a relationship just like I had with Captain Singleton earlier because of the way he handled this. If he yelled, he screamed, he hollered, he'd have made that very difficult for me. But he didn't. And he created a relationship that we could talk and we could communicate. And years later, we would serve together in Afghanistan. And we had this open dialogue and communication that we could not have had if he had handled that situation differently. And so to finish this story up, that gentleman that I'm telling you about is now the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. His name is General Joe Dunford, and just an incredible human being and an incredible leader to boot.
That's a great story, and it's not just a great story, but again, as you said, it's a great example of leadership and how essential it is to almost take that step back or take the bigger look at things. And I think some people have a tendency to, especially senior managers might have a tendency to maybe, I don't want to say rip into people when they see mistakes, because it's almost like I don't know if they feel like that needs to be done. But you're right. It's all about the teaching moment, because I think you certainly learned the valuable lesson, and it's again stuck with you for so many years after that. And that's something that I talk about different scenarios that I'm often faced with, where yes, I could be criticizing somebody or tearing them down or whatever it is, but I always feel that yes, I feel that people respond so much better when they understand they've maybe made a mistake or they've done something wrong, but how to really pivot it into a right thing. So that's a great example. Well done.
Yeah, Mark, I think you're spot on. Nobody comes to work to lose. Everybody shows up every day to win. And a lot of times we let our emotions get in front of that when we're angry, or, we feel the pressure. And that is just the opposite of what we should do. And, there's another piece to this too, that really the higher you go, the more you have to tone that down. As a young leader, you can get a little crazy, yelling, screaming, hollering, and that's not such a big deal. But the higher you go, the more authority, the more responsibility that you have. People can be very uncomfortable around you because they know all that you will. And people don't think of themselves as powerful. And that's not the point. But you are in a position to impact people significantly. And they're well aware of that. So really, the higher you go, a lot of times you have to really tone that rhetoric down, because it can have such a negative impact. Just raising your voice or just being agitated can really set the whole organization back when you didn't intend for that to happen.
Well, and look, and so many studies have shown that when you scream at somebody, they hear this screaming and they're not necessarily hearing the message, and then they get amped up, and then they say something they probably shouldn't, or they think something they shouldn't, and it just goes in a bad way. And so, you're absolutely right. And look, we've all seen and had, whether it's managers or coaches, or I'm assuming commanding officers that have done the screaming in the past. And, looking back, some people might say, oh, well, that was tough love. Well, maybe it was, but it probably wasn't. It's probably just bad leadership. And, I think it's great to hear your instances of that. So I'm now going to shift gears a little bit, and I'd love to hear you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing now. I know that you're with a big company. In fact, one of my probably favorite places to go just hang out.
Oh, man. Well, I currently work at Home Depot. I retired from the Marine Corps, and I went straight to Home Depot. And quite frankly, I went to Home Depot because of the values. I was talking to a mentor that I had from American Corporate Partners, who also just happened to work for Home Depot. Never in a million years thought that I would work for Home Depot. With all the time I had deployed through the years, my wife, Melissa, fixed anything that was broken in the house. I was not that guy.
That's great.
So, I never really thought about it. But I had a meeting with this guy that was with American Corporate Partners as my mentor in a Home Depot office. And I saw these values, and they talked about doing the right thing. It talked about respect for people. It talked about an entrepreneurial spirit. And that just really spoke to me. I didn't expect to see that in corporate America. And so that just opened up some doors and some ideas for me. And I realized that, I needed to focus whatever job search I had on values. And I need to match those values of the organization with my personal and professional and family values. And so that's ultimately how I ended up at Home Depot. I spent some time learning the operation from a field perspective in the stores. Then I taught leadership at Home Depot University, which was just a phenomenal experience. And then I rolled into the current role that I have right now, and I'm responsible for staffing for the Western Division of our merchandising organization, which takes care of all our product sets in Home Depot. So it's been an exciting ride, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And, just have an opportunity to work for a great company and serve with some fantastic people.
I guess the perfect follow-up question then is, have you become more adept at using home improvement tools?
I'm working on a project. I'm actually building a kitchen table. So I would like to say that answer is yes, but perhaps we should wait to see the finished product.
No. But wait a second. Using 12 rolls of duct tape doesn't count. So come on. But that's, it's funny. And we kind of joke about this, my wife and I, but we like to just like wander. We'll get into that Home Depot and wander the aisles and be like, oh yeah, we absolutely need that, 3-pronged, whatever the hell it is. And, we don't need it, but it just seems like we should need it. So they're really clever how they market everything, and having the people wandering around, the workers, talking about everything. I mean, it's a great store and a great experience now. So I'm glad you're doing that, but I also know that occasionally here and there you do some speaking and you speak to whether it's veteran groups or other audiences about leadership. But I don't want to steal your thunder. What are some of the topics you like to talk about?
Mark, I was very, very, very fortunate in my time in the Marine Corps and in Home Depot to serve with some extraordinary leaders and some extraordinary mentors. And, I've had the opportunity since I've retired to talk to different organizations and group about leadership in general, leading large organizations, and mentorship. But I've also had an opportunity to talk a lot about transition and transformation to both athletes and guys like me, folks who have served in the Army, Navy, Air Force, and in my case, Marines, and to talk to them about that transition, but more importantly, the transformation that takes place when you leave one role that's significantly different than a role you might have in corporate America. And so, that has been extremely rewarding to share this journey with people and to try to help people along the way.
Well, that's wonderful. And, the thing is that, one thing I like to talk about is, well, what do you really leave your audience with when you speak? And that to me is the great value. I joked about it with you earlier, but one of the things I like to say is when you hear someone speak and you feel like you've been motivated and rah and go out and get them, and you go, you run out of that theater or that conference room or the meeting area and you go running back to your desk, your office, your whatever, and then you sit down and you're like, okay, I'm excited. Oh wait, what am I doing now? And I think it's so important that the audience leaves with actionable information and so forth. And so what are some of the things that you like to, when you speak to your audience, what is, maybe list a couple of things that you like to leave with them that they can actually act upon?
Mark, if I could leave you with perhaps 3 things. One is have a backup plan. No matter what you're doing in life, you need to have a backup plan. I really learned this the hard way, and I can come back to that in a minute. The second thing is consider your values. No matter what you're doing in life, if your values are not in line, it's going to go askew. So you got to have those values, and you got to consider those values in your decision-making process along the way. And the third thing, especially for people who are making some sort of, not just transition, but a transformation in life, whether it's going from being a professional athlete or an Olympic athlete or a career service member into the corporate world, sometimes a step back in responsibility can lead to a great leap forward. But in taking that step back in responsibility, it requires a degree of humility along the way. And I can share a funny story with you about that as well. But I tell you, as far as having a backup plan, that hit me like a ton of bricks. I was, moving forward in the Marine Corps and just really did not expect to do anything other than being a Marine. And I was on my way to Washington, D.C., and Melissa was taking me to the airport one morning, and I was going to sit on a selection board for, choosing our next crop of leaders for the Marine Corps. I didn't feel so well, and Melissa said, why don't we stop by the doctor on the way? We're going right by the the ER, you can zip in, they'll check you out. You don't want to make the rest of the board members sick, and
Right.
your way. And of course, she shamed me into stopping, and not to mention that we were literally going right past the Baylor Medical Center en route. So we stopped, and I thought, this is my get out of jail free card. Saturday morning, ER in Texas. It's going to be full of cowboys needing to be stitched up. And, we'll have a great excuse to put my head in there. They'll be too busy to see me, and I'll go on. Well, it's the first time I've ever been in the ER, and there was not a soul in there. It was just me. And so they take me back, and I'm thinking, well, there's nobody here. Maybe they'll see me quickly and I can leave and still make my plane. And Mark, I hadn't been in there 5 minutes, and the door burst open, and nurses come in. The doctor comes in and says, "You're having a heart attack." And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. There's got to be some old guy in the room next door. You've made a huge mistake. But that was not true. It was my mistake. Something had malfunctioned. And to make a long story short, everything came out all right. But I knew at that point that my career as a Marine was effectively over. If I was allowed to stay in the Marine Corps, I would have a desk job from then on. And that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be some fat old colonel sitting behind a desk. And so I retired, but I didn't have a backup plan. So I learned that lesson the hard way. You need to have a backup plan in life, no matter where you are. You never know what's around the corner.
And the backup plan has to be actually a one that's realistic backup plan, and not, my backup plan is to be either lead singer for the Rolling Stones or shortstop for the Yankees, but I think I need to work on some other ones. Just guessing.
Yeah, we can go take some batting practice next week if you like.
Yes. Yeah, no, don't know if that's going to happen. But now, in terms of, moving forward and sort of the rest of your career and so forth, I know you really enjoy making a positive impact on people, but I know that you've been in the midst of writing a book and publishing it and getting it out and so forth. Tell me a little bit about your book.
Well, the title of the book is Depot to Depot. And I tell you, Mark, and you have certainly written a fantastic book, and so you know exactly what I'm talking about. The writing it was easy. Now I'm in the editorial process, and I'm absolutely pulling my hair out. But it's Depot to Depot, and it's really about the journey from the recruit depot at Parris Island, South Carolina, to the Home Depot. And I use that journey to illustrate really to two audiences. One, to corporate America, to look at the human capital that they have in the form of veterans. And some of these service members have got tremendous experiences that we could really leverage in corporate America and really leverage to help our economy. And our economy is really the foundation of our country and our success. And there's so much opportunity to leverage this group. So that is part of this book, is aimed at corporate America to help them understand their veteran population. And the other audience is to help guys like me, those guys who served a significant time in the military, who are now not only transitioning, but need to transform into a new role in corporate America, to help understand what that journey's like, and to maybe give some direction and pointers along that journey. It's a unique journey, and very few people have experienced it. A lot of people want to help, but there are not a lot of people who've made that journey. And so it's to help put some guide markers along the way.
Well, it's great that you say that. I'm a big supporter of the military, and I've helped veterans in the past make that transition from military life, from the battlefield essentially, to corporate life and civilian life. And it's interesting because today we hear a lot of different companies that have great messaging about, we love to hire veterans and we support veterans, and a lot of pro-veteran stuff on TV and radio, et cetera. And you see all that and it makes you feel good. But it's actually not as easy as it sounds, because, unfortunately there's a fair amount of challenges make that transition. And, I know that you're helping with your book to help people, as you said, some of the career officers make that transition. But give me, maybe one or two pieces of and brief sort of advice or tips that you might give actually the person that served maybe just 3 or 4, just a young, maybe a 22-year-old, a 24-year-old just coming out, and, they come out and they don't have that plan B, a backup plan. They don't really have a plan A. They're just sort of like, okay, I'm out now. What do I do? What are some good first steps?
Thank you for addressing that, Mark. And there's so many young people that come out of the different services and they look around and say, what do I do, or what skill sets do I have? And corporate America so wants to hire these people, and oftentimes we talk right past each other. But what you're looking at is a group of people who've got phenomenal teamwork. They've worked with, every kind of person imaginable, for every socioeconomic background, every race, every religion, every demographic that you can touch. Your veteran population has really worked and learned how to make a team work like that. And I think a lot of our young people coming out of the service don't realize what an asset that is, or what a skill set that they have learned to get a team of really very eclectic people with very eclectic experiences from all over the world to work together towards a common goal. Not only that, a lot of these young people have worked in some very austere and some very challenging environments. And I think a lot of times they sell themselves short. This is an intangible. I can teach you anything you need to know about working in corporate America, but I cannot teach you character. You either have that or you don't. And these skill sets and experiences are very hard to replicate. But yet, and thinking on your feet, that's what these young people have done. They've had to come up with solutions that are not written down. There's no playbook for solving problems in a third world country. And oh, by the way, somebody's shooting at you while you're trying to solve this problem. So I think it's these intangible skills, the leadership, the poise, and just the ability to think clearly on their feet that this population, this veteran population, should highlight. And I think corporate America should really take a hard look at that as the key skill set they're looking for.
Well, that's you're spot on. And one of the things I like to point out is that there's a tendency for, and it has nothing to do with millennial or this generation or that generation. Basically, historically, people in the early 20s, kind of a age group, sometimes can be a little challenging to manage because there's a tendency for them to they feel that they should be running the world. They should be, they're too smart for that job. They should be, climbing the ladder a lot faster and that sort of thing. And what I've found is that members of the military, they're extremely manageable. They're extremely coachable. They understand that it's all about working hard, doing what you're supposed to be doing, and then progressing that way and sort of progressing through the ranks properly. And they don't feel that they don't have that sort of sense of entitlement. And again, I'm not saying entitlement is pertaining to a specific type of person, but it's just, when I was 22, I'm sure my parents thought, we all thought we were entitled, kind of a thing. So I think it continues on historically, right? So there's so many benefits that hiring military, it's the same thing as hiring people that come from athletic background. They bring so much to the table, but they don't know it. And I think the big gap right now is the gap in giving, again, whether it's athletes or retired and military, the confidence and the understanding that they do bring a lot to the table. A lot of times they come out and they say, well, I'm just some guy that fired artillery, or I sailed on a boat, and I didn't really do anything involving corporate America. And I want to be able to tell as many as possible, no, you bring so many intangible gifts to the table that the average, that the civilian doesn't have. And that's it's all about, to me, sort of educating them, right? Getting them up to speed with all that. And once that kicks in, their confidence turns. And once their confidence turns, they perform better, in meetings and in interviews, and they're more engaged with getting offers, that sort of thing.
Mark, that's a great point. And I will tell you, our young people are a national asset. And I know that may sound a little trite to say that, but I believe it in my heart of hearts. I've seen our young people, young Americans from every cross section, every corner of the earth, or every corner of the country, do some amazing things, selfless acts that would never be talked about, will never be seen. And we have got a core group of people that are just absolutely irreplaceable for our country. And what I found is young people will live up to whatever expectation you have. And a lot of times, the older we get, we look back and we downplay them because of their youth. But if we take the time, put our arm around them, give them a little teaching, a little coaching along the way, and then trust them to do what we've taught them to do, these guys and gals can just go to the moon. And unfortunately, we often hold them back. But if we will teach them, trust them, mentor them, and trust them to go, there is absolutely no stopping them individually. There's no stopping our organizations. And our country will only continue to grow and get better with them at the helm.
Wow, excellent. I'm going to make sure my kids hear you say that. They'll be thrilled. Now, I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to hit the part of the podcast where it's called Hit Your Mark. And I'm going to fire a couple of quick things at you. Just a little bit, you're a little unprepared for this, but it's I'm sure you've faced a lot worse, so I'm not too worried about this. But what I want you to do is, looking back on your time in the military, think about a time that there was a prank done, a funny prank done either on you or one that you did on someone else that stands out that you can remember and say, oh my God, that was hilarious. And keep it sort of PG rated if you could.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, this will be on the border of PG, but it was hilarious at the time. So you can imagine, this was the first time I was in combat, and I was a platoon commander. And our unit was originally stationed in Hawaii. And we went from Hawaii, and we'd been deployed about 7 months to Japan. We'd been in Okinawa and mainland Japan. And from there, we went to Saudi Arabia and then on into Kuwait, in combat. And you can imagine, we'd been together nearly a year at this point. We were all young. We were all very close. And so you can imagine a bunch of 18, 19, 21, 22-year-old Marines sometimes can get into a little mischief. And so the Marines would take an ammunition can, and you can imagine it's probably a foot long, maybe half a foot wide, and maybe 2 feet high, and it's green and it's waterproof. And what you do is once a week you would put your socks and your T-shirt in there, and you'd kind of rinse it out a little bit. And you'd put it in the water, and you just kind of, as we moved through the desert, it would kind of slosh around. It's kind of like your own washing machine. Well, so after laundry was done on this Sunday, and we had not gone into combat yet, and we were still doing a lot of training, a lot of moving around the desert, getting ready to, for D-Day and to roll into combat. After these guys had washed their clothes, one night, one of my other gun sections went to their sister gun section, and they stole their washing machine. Well, they took their washing machine, again, this ammunition can, and they used it as a toilet. And they took it and they sealed it back up and put it back on the back of the gun truck in with the rest of the ammunition. And so you can just imagine that sitting in the hot desert sun for about a week before it was opened. And next Sunday, these guys are ready to do their weekly wash, and you can imagine what they opened up. The sights and smells were pretty special.
Oh,
you can imagine, we just had a reunion here in Las Vegas. So 25 plus years later, and Marines are still talking about it. It's a wonder that they didn't kill each other before.
Well, you're right. It is a wonder. And I'm assuming there was some sort of retaliation at some point, but that's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but now, that might be beyond the PG portion of
exactly. Now, the next thing is maybe a tinge of seriousness to it, but I guess it's funny. Me as a civilian, I mean, I didn't serve. I'm a big supporter, but I didn't serve. So I find sometimes I kind of feel a little clunky. I don't really know what to say or not say. There's a little bit of that, because you're effectively in a club. I mean, you've served, you've done all that. I'm not in that club. So I don't know I can't get into that club. It's a closed club for those that have done that, right? And, not that I'm looking at it as good or bad or whatever, but the point is that sometimes civilians don't know how to ask, we all want to know what was it like, because we see the movie versions of all this stuff. We see everything glamorized. And we don't see the bad stuff. You guys have all seen a lot of the bad stuff. But is there a moment that you feel okay talking about where you said, oh crap, my time is almost up, or this could go bad? Was there a time that you were genuinely, and maybe it's been a lot of times, but is there a specific time you can think of where you were like, whoa, this might not go well?
Yes, there are some times like that, and I think we all have them. But Mark, I'll tell you, I think the bigger issue is not what happens in combat, and I don't mean to downplay that, because there's some extraordinary acts of heroism and selflessness that can never be described. But I really and truly think the truest acts of courage I saw were moral courage, doing the right thing when it was very uncomfortable to do the right thing, and standing up for what was right. And it's easy to sit here and talk about, but when you're faced with that dilemma and doing the right thing, and sometimes doing the right thing is not the best thing for you personally or professionally, that's what I think is the true mark of a leader, and really a true mark of a human being.
Oh, that's a great answer. And I couldn't agree with you more. And, I think a lot is also lost with, again, from our perspective, we see a lot of the stuff, that's being thrown our way. But what we don't see is all of the tremendous amount of effort that it takes behind the scenes to get everything done. I mean, it's just, we're moving mountains to get somebody prepared for whether it's combat or just to be combat ready. It's incredible. I mean, all the people that are working, whether it's the administration side or whether it's the maintenance side, or, these people are often like, they feel like, well, gee, we're not on TV, but we should be, sort of a thing. So it's there's so many elements of military service that I think sometimes go unappreciated.
There is, Mark. And if I could highlight one group, I was fortunate. I chose to do this. I did it. I loved it. But there's a group I think that really deserves recognition, and they're often overlooked. And it's the spouses, but moreover, the family holistically, the spouses and the kids. You think about dad or mom leaving. You don't know if they're coming back. You don't know when they're coming back. When they do come back, you're going to move. And it's a life of constant change. And these families just do incredible work. And their service to our country is something I cannot put into words. The magnitude of what they give is incredible. And they do it because they love their spouse, they love their mom, they love their dad. And really and truly, it's their way of serving and giving back to the country. And I think if you talk to a Marine kid, a kid whose mom or dad were in any of the branches of service, they've got a special place in their heart for the country. And I tell you, I could never thank them enough. And I think if you talk to any service member, they would say the same thing.
No, that's fantastic. All right, just a couple more quick questions. One is, can you think of? I'm going to toss it over to the sports side of things. Do you have a sports, let's say, idol that you'd like to meet, or maybe you've had the chance to meet, and if so, if you've met with them, what have you said to them, or have you had one of those moments?
Oh gosh, I wish I did. I was named after a Marine who played a little bit of baseball. His name was Ted Williams.
Yes, familiar with him, yeah.
So, I wish I could have met Ted Williams. And of course, I'm a huge Boston Red Sox fan, as you can imagine, for a whole host of reasons, but primarily because of Ted Williams and of course, because he was a Marine. But I would have loved to have met him. And you think about not just Ted Williams, but all those athletes, especially in World War II, who literally gave up everything and to go and sacrifice. And you talk about selflessness, you talk about service, and all those intangibles that make us who we are as Americans and who we are as a people. This group of World War II athletes who went and served just are at the top of my list.
Oh, that's great. Bob Feller was one. I mean, there were many, but great. That's a great comment. Now, last question, an easy one, maybe. If you could pick 3 people, alive or dead, to hang out and have a drink with, who would they be?
Oh my gosh, that's the kind of question my wife would ask me, and I have absolutely no good answer for that, I'm sure. I guess I would obviously start with Ted Williams.
Yep.
I would love to spend time with Winston Churchill.
Oh, cool. That's great.
And gosh, I think George Washington. You think back to the founding of our country, and you talk again about character and moral courage. And this guy really had everything laid at his feet. He could have been the king, literally. And he said no. And to have that kind of self-discipline, that kind of self-control, and to be able to put your ego behind you for the greater good, that's something pretty special. And I would love to talk to him and just really listen to him.
This is going to be a little strange to say, but he would have been one of the ones I picked. When you said George Washington, I almost fell out of my chair because I completely agree with you. And just what he faced with, basically a fighting force that was sometimes kind of interested in doing this and sometimes not, and how to keep them all together, and the stories of really the true heroism that came out of that, the Revolutionary War, is really incredible to hear. That's amazing. So if people want to know more about Colonel Ted Studdard, where should they go? What should they do?
If anybody would like to follow up, just reach out to me via email, Ted Studdard, STUDDARD @AOL.com, or my LinkedIn page has got all my contact information. And I think I'm the only Ted Studdard out there.
That's great. It's funny. I thought I was the only Mark Moyer out there until I tried to buy my website, markmoyer.com. And there was some Mark Moyer in Phoenix, Arizona. He worked for General Electric, and I found out about him. And so he started to negotiate with me over the website. And I said, well, what do you want it for? Come on, man, I'm trying to run a coaching business. And he said, well, someday I might want to write a blog. And I was like, oh, God's sake. So then I tried to tell him, well, I'm just going to use my middle initial then. And he said, nobody uses middle initials. So I kind of blew him off for a few weeks. Then he called back, said, all right, never mind, I'll do it a little less. And so we negotiated. Since that time, I found out, oh my God, there are other Mark Moyers out there. And there's another one that does recruiting, another one that does, photography. But when I do a Google search and I see all these pictures of Mark Moyers, but it's other people, it's kind of weird. So I'm glad it's good that you're the only Ted Studdard. It's not so, I don't know, shaking or something. Now that's great. And then when do you expect, or when do you hope your book will be out?
That is a fantastic question, Mark. I would like to give you a date. I'm hoping by the first of the year.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, perfect time for people to buy maybe a slightly delayed holiday gift, but that's a great idea. And well, look, you've been a tremendous guest. I mean, I've heard you speak before. I think you've got such great messaging and teaching. You as you were saying earlier, I mean, you truly take the time to teach, and that's what makes any sort of interaction with you so valuable. I mean, I think people come away with lessons every time. So I truly appreciate your time being here. You continue to make your mark, and that's the whole point of this podcast, are people that are making their mark in a positive way, and you're continuing to teach, and you're continuing to speak to people, whether it's veterans or professionals, executives, Home Depot employees, et cetera. I think it's fantastic what you do. And, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a privilege, and it's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks so much for joining us today on this episode of Make Your Mark podcast. The goal of the podcast is to help you find ways to make your mark, to succeed in life, and to jump past your competition. Be sure to leave me a review on iTunes and Stitcher, and subscribe to be the first to hear new episodes. If you're looking for ways to make your mark, send me an email, mark@markmoyer.com, and I'll get back to you right away. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.